Well, hello, Clive here, welcoming you to another edition of the Health Revolution. And today I'm joined by Justin Walker, and I've been interested in what Justin has to say for many, many years. And recently, he has, I think, put a lot of his ideas about how we could be recovering the economy into one document. And when I first saw the document, I noticed, well, it's 28 pages long. And I suddenly realized just a short time back, if I'd been asked to read a 28-page first chapter of a book, I would have thought nothing of it. But in this video generation, I look, 28 pages, you really expect me to read all that? So I shocked myself by my own reaction to averseness to reading these days. But I did read it, and it's very interesting. And perhaps you'd like to explain the basics of it, perhaps not all 28 pages, but um, a succinct version of it, because really everybody needs to know this basic information. Then, of course, I want to ask, how can we possibly get people to understand it or understand the importance of them knowing this information? In a way, it's the most important information right now that I can think of.
Well, thank you, Clive. It is a vast subject, and I've been at it for 12 years. We're talking here about the 1914 Treasury issued, debt free, interest free Bradbury pound, a Treasury note created to save the nation from financial collapse. And there it is. There it is in its full glory. And they were called Bradbury pounds because they were signed by Sir John Bradbury, who was the first secretary to the Treasury. And unlike Bank of England notes, they don't have on them, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of, because these notes were based on the wealth and the labor potential, the creativity of the country. And if you people think, well, that all sounds a bit hoi polloi, we're already doing it. The Treasury actually does it with all the coins in your pocket, your £2, your £1, your 50 pence, 20 pence, etc. That's called M for Mike. M stands for money, M naught. That's called money supply. That's their code word for money supply. And the Treasury could create all the money the world, well, the country needs, shall we say, but the world could do the same for every single sovereign country. This is sovereign money. This is debt-free, interest-free sovereign money, which a government can create to pay for your essential services, your infrastructure, and your strategic industries. In other words, everything you need to make sure your country is safe, prosperous, and happy. Now they could do that. And in fact, there's actually no need for direct taxation. But this Bradbury pound came about at the beginning of the First World War as an emergency measure because the banks genuinely wrong-footed themselves. Why? Because they were on the gold standard in those days, and because the City of London and the Bank of England had created many more notes than they had actually in gold in their vaults. In other words, the Bank of England didn't have the gold in the vaults to meet the demand of people wanting to exchange their Bank of England notes for gold, because obviously the uncertainty of a global war, the outbreak of war, the people wanted to get gold out. They wanted to clutch gold, not Bank of England notes. And that's why the Treasury, in a matter of a few days, agreed to the Treasury creating all the money it needed to fight the First World War. That's how it started. And then suddenly the bankers went running back to David Lloyd George, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And unfortunately, the Bradbury was then phased out. And the bankers were allowed to buy gilts and bonds and at 3%, etc. So, in other words, the government, if you like, and the City of London went back to their old tricks of the government borrowing debt-laden money from the private financial sector, which basically involves itself in nothing but skullduggery and fraud. And as a result, our national debt went up from 650 million in 1914 up to 7,500 million in 1918 or 1919 Treaty of Versailles. In other words, what we're saying here is the government can create today all the money it needs. So when we've got the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Miss Reeves, or Miss Feeves, as some people call her, Rachel Feeves, she talks about a £22 billion hole to fill The truth of the matter is the country today, according to the Office of National Statistics, is worth around 40 trillion pounds. So you could put into liquidity around about 1 or 2 trillion pounds, which would then be spent wisely to make sure that all our services are looked after, infrastructure is looked after, and our strategic industries. It's as simple as that, Clive. In other words, we're already doing it for the coins in our pocket, but we could be doing it for everything. And there needn't be, if you like, direct taxation, complex, invasive taxation. And of course, the most important thing, we would get politicians off our backs to a very large extent. So that's it in a nutshell. It's a 28-page letter full of detail, hyperlinks, and it's also challenging the the Bank of England's relationship with the Bank for International Settlements, which we can come on to later perhaps, and the Treasurer and the Chancellor of Exchequer's relationship with the Governor of the Bank of England. So much secrecy. The entire global financial system is bathed in secrecy, and it belongs to the people who carry out all the shenanigans behind the scenes. They're private individuals, unelected, unaccountable. The people are not involved in money creation or money supply whatsoever. And that's why we have a third world. That's why we've got so many people in poverty, because there's not enough money in the world. And it's because we are controlled by the tiny few. There we go. That's in a nutshell.
Well, they say that the love of money is the root of all evil, but obviously, in actual fact, the lack of money is the root of all evil because
Absolutely.
that's
Absolutely.
how we're controlled.
That's absolutely right. And unfortunately, if you look at recent history, in fact, you've only got to look since, well, I start saying the real problem started with the so-called Glorious Revolution of 1688, which was not particularly glorious for the British people or the English people. It was glorious for the bankers because the what they called the black nobility, the Venetian bankers, which then morphed into the bankers of Amsterdam, moved their centre of operations across to the City of London. That's when the City of London effectively became the power base, the financial power base of the world. And one of the things I point out in the letter is that according to Professor Richard Werner, who is one of the top economists in the world today, and he's actually quite a fan of sovereign money and people-led banks. So he's actually on our side to a very large extent. He actually pointed out in a program, the hyperlink is there in the letter, but the City of London is actually a separate country to Britain. It is a country, it's a state within a state. So technically speaking, the Bank of England is in a foreign country. And yet the Bank of England plays a very key part in our money creation and money supply. So these are a few questions that the Chancellor has been asked, and we expect her reply, hopefully, because we know a lot of people are sending letter through their MPs asking for a response to the four key questions, which we can come on to.
Does she have an obligation to reply to something like this? Because, what's being suggested is the possibility of treason and various other things that she's done, alerting somebody to a possible crime. Does she have to
Yes, she does.
respond? Okay.
Yes. Oh, yes, she most certainly does, because under the common law, she can be charged with misconduct in public office.
But
So absolutely she is a public servant. We must always remember, all of us must remember that, our government, our MPs, they are all public servants. They are here to serve. They're not here to rule over us. They're here to serve.
yes, it'd be good if the definition of the word servant was explained to all the public servants that actually know what it means.
Absolutely.
So Rachel Reeve, will she respond or will she just ignore it?
It all depends. I'm hoping all your viewers today will do what hundreds, possibly thousands, are already doing. I've been on a few podcasts like your own, and I've been encouraging. The feedback's been tremendous. And what I'm wanting people to do is to go for the link to the letter, which I think you've got, Clive, and then simply send that link with a covering letter to their MP saying, reminding them that, they are servants of the constituents. And what you require, and that's a very important word under common law, you don't demand, you require. Under the common law, you require something. And you require them to send a letter, send this link with a covering email, asking them to send a letter to the Chancellor stating that their constituent wants those 4 questions answered. There are 4 distinct questions at the end of the 28-page letter that she is required to answer. And if she doesn't answer them, then she is leaving herself open to a charge of public misconduct, misconduct in public office. But the important thing is we're putting a wedge in the door. We're making a start, because this thing's not going to go away. The genie, the truth genie, is out of the bottle. This is not, it's not going back now. People will start to wake up to money creation, money supply, and how we've all been hoodwinked since effectively 1694, when the Bank of England was created, and with the Bank of England, the national debt, which, as I said, we don't need a national debt. And the amazing thing now, the national debt is well over £3 trillion, and the interest repayments, monthly repayments, just 3 months worth of monthly repayments for our national debt, which we never needed, is the equivalent of that 22 billion hole that the Labour Party keep going on about. The whole thing is a mess, and it's a criminal mess. And it's our politicians who have given the bankers the legislation, not the law, the legislation needed to carry out all this fraud. The bottom line is, Clive, we don't really need private banks, and we don't need career politicians. And, this is where good people now have got to come together to reimagine how we wish to be governed in the future without involving this sort of fraud and this goings on. It's, as I said, we are all the victims of this, and we've got to get our act together, because it's only our ignorance about money creation and money supply that is the protective shield for these people in the City of London and elsewhere, the World Economic Forum and the Bank for International Settlements. And maybe I'll just say a few words about the Bank for International Settlements, because that just confirms how we are all ignorant of what is going on in the world and who is really driving things. The Bank for International Settlements was set up in 1930 by Hitler's future finance minister, Helmer Schlacht, with Britain's longest-serving governor of the Bank of England, a chap called Montague Norman. And quite simply, this bank was set up to look after German war reparations after World War I, but it morphed very quickly into becoming the central bank for all central banks. And currently, the Bank for International Settlements, which hardly anyone's heard of, has got over 63 member central banks, including the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, many others. And it oversees over 97%, I think it's now, of the world's money supply and money creation. And nobody's heard of it. And the best thing is, this organization has given itself diplomatic immunity. And the governor of the Bank of England goes off once every 2 months to go and have a private meeting with the top 12 governors and others, the big banking families behind all of this. And there's no minutes taken. And the question I'm asking, one of my 4 questions is, does the governor brief the Chancellor of the Exchequer what was decided upon and what was discussed at these meetings? We don't know, and that's the honest truth. So that's the Bank for International Settlements in a nutshell, and nobody's heard of it. I've actually talked to 20-odd MPs in the last 12 years, and the first thing I asked them is, have you ever heard of the Bank for International Settlements? And the answer has always been, no. What does it do? We don't know. So it's quite incredible what is going on. It's all criminal, it's all fraudulent, and it affects every single human being on this planet. And quite honestly, if we didn't have the private banking system, the private financial system that runs the world today, and those who control the money control the world and what happens on the world stage, if we didn't have that, we would have a world that was peaceful, prosperous, and happy. There we are. That's it in a nutshell.
Well, they wouldn't want that, would they?
You're damn right they wouldn't.
So what do you think happened to Lloyd George? Somebody came along and threatened him with the embarrassing...
It's an interesting one. I'm still doing research on that. In fact, one of the books I've got unfortunately, we've got builders in at the moment, so a lot of my books are in boxes waiting to come out. But one of the books I've got is the war memoirs of David Lloyd George. Now, we do know that he was quite involved with the Zionist movement. And we know about the Balfour Declaration of 1917. We know the shenanigans, a lot of shenanigans are going on behind the scenes. We know the First World War, as with the Second World War, was cleverly engineered by the bankers and others. You had people like Alfred Milner. You had King Edward VII was also involved in basically pushing Germany into having this war, because basically there was a powerful clique, and it included Lord Rothschild, did not want Germany taking the #1 slot in the world. And so you can see how Germany was pushed into World War One, as Germany was pushed into World War Two too. And there's still a lot of truth. There's a real history. We've still got a lot of uncovering to do to find out what really happened. But the one thing you can safely say, the bankers are certainly there pulling the strings in the back.
And, so historically, the Bradbury pound was in circulation for how long exactly?
Well, the real push for the Bradbury pound was 1914-15, and then gradually it was wound down. And the last Bradbury pound, Treasury note, came out in 1926, I think it was, but it was done on a small scale. In other words, they didn't want people suddenly waking up to the fact, hang on a moment, why are we why are we selling gilts and bonds? Why is our government, raising money by selling gilts and bonds at interest bearing, when we could just create the notes like we did with the Bradbury? And amazingly, I came across this. The story of how I came across this was, quite fascinating. My uncle was a director of the Bank of England for 17 years, Sir Harry Pilkington, later Lord Pilkington. He actually went to the very first Bilderberg meeting in 1954 before becoming a director of the Bank of England in 1955 until 1972. And he actually told me on a train once, I was going back to school, he gave me 2 bits of advice to take through life. He said, never ever believe anything you read in the press because we control it, and never ever believe a politician when they say they can do something. They can't unless we say they can. Age 16, I didn't press him too much about who was he talking about, but I remember thinking at the time he probably means bankers, and because I knew he was going back to he was going to one of his last meetings as a director of the Bank of England. And it was when was it, 2012, I got this strange phone call. I'd already written an article for the UK column when it was a newspaper stating we ought to have a greenback pound, because essentially I had shown, I was interested in money creation because I come across a lady called Ellen Brown, and she was talking about the greenback dollar of Abraham Lincoln during the American Civil War. And I discovered then, I thought, well, why don't we have a greenback pound? So I've written an article saying, why can't we have debt-free, interest-free money created by the government? And that's when I got this mysterious phone call from somebody claiming to be the son of a director of the Bank of England who was on his deathbed, who knew my uncle, and this chap, who was not going to be long for this world, to give the exact quote, he said that he wanted me to know the word Bradbury, not the Bradbury pound, he just said Bradbury. And if you do research the Bradbury, you will find a solution to all of Britain's economic woes. So that was the start of my journey. And then I bumped into money reformers, 2 chaps called Ken Palmerton and David Pidcock. And they guided me all sorts, to meet people and behind the scenes. And I got people ringing me from behind the scenes, telling me the truth about banking and stuff. And that's how I've become involved. I'm not an economist. But the one thing that is interesting is that every economist in the world who likes to call themselves, I belong to the Austrian School of Economics or the New Economic School or the Keynesian School or whatever, there's about 10 or 15 of these schools of economic thought. Not one of them recognizes that the entire system is in private hands of people who are unelected, unaccountable, and who prefer to meet in absolute secrecy. And in the case of the Bank for International Settlements, no minutes to be taken. It's incredible. And these are the people who are controlling how much or how little money the humanity has to spend. And that's why we have so much poverty in the world. That's why we have a third world. It's crazy. And if we remove the bankers and we started having sovereign money, people's money, people being in control of money creation and money supply, we wouldn't have half the problems in the world we see today.
So, all those years ago when you first brought it to my attention, it seems like the idea was too early. Do you believe now is the time for this idea to come into?
Now is the time. There's so many people since COVID, since all the, we've got a complete, millions of people are waking up since COVID. And all we've got to do now is show them the real driving force, the real mindset that was behind the COVID fiasco and the blatant dishonesty and the distraction that COVID was and everything else. But we've got to show them the mindset, the same mindset that triggered the 9/11 and triggered the so-called war on terror, the same mindset that's triggered this ridiculous climate change debacle, where you've got good Greens, you've got really good people who have been deceived. And I wish the Greens would just wake up and look at who you're jumped into bed with, the likes of Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England, who is now the henchman for the UN Secretary General to clobber any good industry, any good business that is not following the net zero lines. It's all bad science, as the late Professor David Bellamy used to say. It's all bad science. But, the Greens have jumped into bed with the same mindset as controlling the money of the world unlawfully. So, we've got the World Economic Forum talks about a great reset. Well, humanity has got to consider a great reset to get rid of the evil that is now, pulling the strings. And we've got to get rid of career politicians. And there's a whole host of things we need to discuss and to sort out. And in fact, one of the key things I'm starting to evolve myself now is how we govern ourselves in the future. We've got to start getting people to come together to see how we can try and harness wisdom and how we can harness experience, humility, and compassion, and how we can try and get into the driving seat human values as opposed to the values shown by politicians, which is usually about self-serving. I mean, we've seen the appalling goings on in Parliament of accepting gifts, going off I'm sorry, we had one really good politician in the last Parliament, and that was Andrew Bridgen, who, by the way, had the courage to mention the Bradbury pound, the first time any politician had brought the Bradbury pound up in the chamber, in the House of Commons, for over 70 years. So he had the courage to do it, but sadly, he lost his seat. So we need to wake up all these new MPs. There's something like 300 and something brand new MPs who are not fully, shall we say, they've not been fully trained to be within the Westminster bubble. They're still finding their ways. And if we can try and find a few Andrew Bridgens who will suddenly look at money creation and money supply and say, hang on a moment, what on earth is going on here? Because all these MPs will be getting letters about how, social services are stopping particular services, how people, we've already seen how people are going to lose 200 or 300 years and two or 300 pounds for their heating, like I am, like probably you, I don't know. But the point is, people are suffering out there. There's a lot of poverty. The food banks are busier than ever. What is going on? These MPs will know that people are hurting. So when they see that the government could create all the money it needs and that all these problems could easily go away if only the people took back control of money creation and money supply. It really is just simple as that. So we've got to persuade all these new MPs to break ranks from the party whips and the way they are controlled. They've got to start thinking independently from their political parties and the way they're controlled. As I said, there are better ways to govern ourselves, and we need to address this.
Yes, I think for an MP to be attracted to having that job, I think they're going to have some psychological issues, psychopathy or whatever it might be, control freakery. So I think starting with them, probably there isn't much hope. I don't think their motives are honourable, generally speaking. I think Parliament one might say a chamber where 600 people can meet and discuss things is not such a bad thing. However, where do you find 600 wise people that everybody might agree are wise enough? A lot of people might vote for David Attenborough, but then some of what he says is questionable. Unfortunately, because people's minds are so conditioned by the media and education at school, how do you get people to make the right decision? I mean, who
But
are
it's
the wise
interesting. Yeah,
people?
what you say is absolutely true. The thing I would say is if you can't control the money, you can't control the media, you can't control what's going into people's minds. Basically, for the mindset that we're up against, controlling the money creation and money supply is the equivalent of oxygen and blood for them. If you cut that off, they wither and die. The elite, the New World Order, what do we like to call them? I mean, there's so many different names to describe them, but this elitist mindset that basically wants a new feudal system, a Chinese style digital feudal system where you've got central bank digital currencies teaming up with a social credit system, teaming up with artificial intelligence and the most sophisticated monitoring equipment so you can be checked in your home, on the streets, and in your workplace. That is coming down the line very quickly indeed. And we know the World Economic Forum is driving this. Now, the only way you're going to stop that is to insist that the government no longer partakes of the international financial scene. We become sovereign with money creation and money supply. We open people's banks. One of the things that Ellen Brown, the lady who I became enamored by her writings, she advocates public banks like the Bank of North Dakota in America. This is where we've got to take back control. And if you take back control of money creation and money supply, the other side loses their ability to control. And that's it in a nutshell. So we can win. But first, we've got to break down our collective ignorance, because it's our collective ignorance on money creation and money supply that is providing the shield to protect the wrongdoers to carry on with the status quo, to carry on with promoting the national debt, promoting money out of thin air, all the things they get up to. The only way to defeat the bankers is to take back control of money creation and money supply.
So, aside from educating everybody who is willing to listen, are there any other lawful remedies that people could take, certain things that they could do or could not do, which would have an impact on things?
Well, at the moment, I mean, obviously, common law is extremely important, recognizing that we are classed in their strange world as being legal fictions. There's a whole host of things that we are now starting to address and wake up to. But the key to it all at this moment, the focusing, the laser light, we've got to be focused on this, is to expose how we are all controlled by the other side having the ability to control money. Now, if that is removed, everything else will start to fall into place. And I think that one of the problems we have at the moment, we are tending to be, we're saying how bad things are. We're always reacting to what they're doing to us. You don't win a war, and we are at war with these people, albeit hopefully without loss of life. Hopefully we can do it peacefully. But we are at war with this evil mindset that we're up against. And you don't win a war by always reacting to what they do. We have to do things that make them react to us. Because once they are reacting to us, it means we are in the driving seat and they will lose. There's only my uncle said around 10,000 people really run the world. There was a Dutch banker, some people may have heard of, called Ronald Bernard. He states that around 8,500 people run the world. We're not talking about a very large number of people, but bear this in mind, our population supposedly is around 8 billion and more. Now, that means there's roughly about one of them for every approximately million of us. But all of us are fast asleep, but we're waking up. COVID helped to wake up a very large number of people. More and more people are walking away from mainstream media and taking their news from the alternative media. So things are heading in the right direction. But if you really want to wake people up, get them to think about money creation, money supply. I mean, I always say, if I can understand it, any fool can understand. As I said, I'm not an economist. I never went to university. I've just kept an open mind, applied critical thinking, and I like to think I'm able to use common sense. Now, if I can understand this money creation and money supply, anyone can.
Well, and luckily, having read it, it is very readable, very understandable, and it really is incredibly important. So I'll put links below so that people can check it out for themselves. And I want to thank you very much, Justin, for all your
Well,
work.
thank you, Clive, for giving me this opportunity. As I said, if everyone who's watched this is inspired to simply send that link to their MP, asking for with a covering from the MP, a covering letter to the Chancellor stating, please answer those 4 questions. Because I tell you now, as soon as she tries to answer those 4 questions, it'll collapse things, and they know it. So it's going to be very interesting. As I said, maybe in 6 months from now, we may have another interview. I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see how it pans out. But the time is now right. There's about to be a budget that's going to be difficult. And they're going to try and find ways to tax us more, to take away things which should be ours by right. So, they're going to make life difficult for us. And that's part of their overall game. But there is a simple, easy solution to bring all of that to an end. So let's go for it.
Brilliant, Justin. Let's go for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Clive. Very good. Thank you.
Once upon a time, there were 100 million people. They had different interests, different beliefs, different occupations, but for the most part, they got along pretty well. Then one day, a gang of a few hundred people showed up. Need to zoom in some more to see them. I know they're there somewhere. Zoom in. There they are. And this gang of a few hundred said to the throng of 100 million, from now on, you all have to give us a cut of everything you earn.
This is an accurate graphical comparison between the number of American taxpayers and the number of U.S. congressmen.
And the throng said, gosh, do we have to give you a cut of what we earn? And the gang of a few hundred said, yes, you have to. And the throng said, well, okay, I guess we have to. And one little troublemaker asked, what if we don't? The gang of a few hundred didn't like this and said, if you do not comply, we shall unleash upon you our legions of enforcers. And the throng cried, oh no, please don't. We will comply, we will pay.
This is an accurate graphical comparison between the number of American taxpayers and the total number of IRS employees.
Time went by and the gang of a few hundred said, now we want more of what you earn. And this kept happening over and over again until eventually some of the throng were paying almost half of what they earned to the gang. Whenever the gang demanded more, the throng would say, golly, we're already having a tough time. Do we really need to give you even more? And the gang always said, yes, you must, or we shall unleash our legion of enforcers. Now the gang of a few hundred was getting trillions of dollars every year, spending it on wars and pyramid schemes, giving away goodies to their friends, buying influence, and doing lots of other things. And some of the throng started saying, we don't really like the war you're waging with the money we give you. Do we really have to be paying for that? And the gang said, yes, we demand it. Don't make us send out our legion of enforcers. And some of the throng said, you're taking our money and giving it to huge corporations and giant banks, and some people who just don't want to work. A lot of these things we don't like. And the gang said, we don't care. We will decide how to spend it. You just do as you're told, or else. And the throng said, okay, I guess we have to. But eventually the throng got so fed up, so angry, that they took a drastic step. One day they said to the gang, we don't like what you're doing. We want a new gang. And after pouring a huge amount of time and money into the effort, they replaced the gang with a new gang. Then the throng pleaded with the new gang. Now, at long last, can we keep our own money, or at least keep more of it? And the new gang said, sorry, but after much discussion, we've decided that you can't. You have to keep giving us what you've been giving, in fact, a little bit more than before. The throng was distraught and said, this is dreadful. But after all, what choice do we have? I mean, they say we must comply, and they have that scary legion of enforcers. We're powerless against them. We'd better just do as we're told. So they did as they were told, got poorer and poorer, and lived miserably ever after. But after all, what else could they have done? What power could this throng possibly have compared to this gang of a few hundred and their enforcers? What chance would this thing have against this thing? How could these 100 million people ever hope to successfully resist the awesome power of this tiny little dot? In case anyone missed this, let's review. Here's them, here are their enforcers, here's us. Them, us. Them, us. Does anything about this seem just a little strange to you? Are you perhaps wondering, why does the throng need the permission of the dot to do anything? Why do these people feel the need to ask this tiny little dot if they can keep more of what they earn? Why would they spend year after year literally begging for lower taxes from this little dot? Is this dot just really darn intimidating? Is it very persuasive in its reasoning? To be blunt, why would this throng give a rodent's backside what this tiny little dot wanted? The fact that this tiny dot has the gall to issue such demands to such a throng is pretty startling in and of itself. But what is far more amazing is that the throng obeys this minuscule little parasitic gang of control freaks. What could possibly explain this? Let's ask the dot.
This is how it works. When we, the dot, take your money and spend it on things you don't like, we're representing you. In fact, though you're not allowed to actually keep your own money, you're allowed to decide which little dot will steal half of what you earn. So that really means that you're in charge and that you're agreeing to give us your money. In fact, we, the dot, are serving you when we take your money and spend it on things you don't like. And so you should thank us and treat us with great respect and honor for having robbed you on your behalf for your own good in order to serve you by doing things you don't want us to do.
So there you have it. I hope that cleared everything up for you.
If you're not entirely satisfied with the dot's explanation of things, you really should read the book The Most Dangerous Superstition, available now at Amazon.com.